Dementia is not always just about loss. Dementia and people with dementia have a story, and we need to continue to relate to them in the context of that story and in the context of their humanity.
She was never so gentle as on our porch that morning in her chestnut chair, like watercolour clouds in a fisher's pond. She floats softly over the valleys of memory. Her colours sink to dust, halls of faded ink, and letters to herself.
Hey there, my name is Cooper and I'm your host of this episode of Parting. We're speaking with Lynn, an associate professor working at the University of Wollongong. When we speak about grief, death and dying, it's usually about things that have happened in the past, but there can be times in our lives where we grieve over the present. It's important to know that we're a group of young people who happen to live in places that are considered disadvantaged. We can experience things that people that come from advantaged places don't get to see, hear or feel. The places where we live are on the homelands of the Dharawal, Alauri and Wadi peoples, and we want to acknowledge the elders of the place where we live. In this episode of Parting, we're talking about dementia. We will visit the Year 9 students in the Unteachables in a sec, but Lynn has more to share.
There's more than 100 different diseases that cause dementia. The main one we know causes most of them is Alzheimer's disease. The next most common one is called vascular dementia. So the same reason people might get blockages and problems with their heart, in their veins and arteries, it affects the brain in a similar way. We do recognise memory, but it also does begin to affect the other functions of the brain. So it affects the way we hear things, the way we see things, our ability in the end to begin to move with such confidence. It affects personality sometimes in some people. And I guess as the dementia progresses, then you begin to see it also affecting the physical functions of the brain. So people think of memory, but actually dementia is a progressive disease that ends up affecting all the functions that the brain performs.
Slowly walk down the hall, turn right, go forward, look ahead. But it all seems so unfamiliar. Earrings in the freezer drawer, tea bags loose in our letterbox.
Dementia has probably replaced cancer as our most feared disease, and I think people really do have a great fear over losing their capacity to think and plan and remember. And of course that is a frightening thing. It is part of what we have imagined is to be human. It's a very philosophical idea that we think and therefore we are, but the more we know about the way the brain works, the more we understand about how to help people become more oriented and more able to continue to do things that are enjoyable and meaningful for them. For a lot of people, dementia is associated with the ageing process. Therefore, some people, when they're diagnosed, it is a loss of the, retirement life that they imagined. They've saved money, they've kind of imagined a retirement where they can sort of stay active and well and engaged and travel and do all those kinds of things. And so for some people, it's a loss of that dream and that realisation of the end of life that they had imagined for one another. For some people, they would say it's a grief and a loss around the nature of the relationship. So for a lot of family members who perhaps, did primarily define themselves previously as being a spouse, as the dementia progresses, then perhaps they begin to perceive that relationship more as a caring relationship. We're getting better at diagnosing it, and so people are being diagnosed much earlier in the process of the Alzheimer's disease or the vascular disease that causes their dementia. So people are actually living much longer with a diagnosis.
She paced along, inky floorboards in a house that sags. Slowly walk down the hall, turn right, go forward, look ahead. But it all seems so unfamiliar. Here it is in the freezer drill. 2 pages list in our box.
So we talk about environmental design principles. We go into bathrooms and we replace the lever taps with things like old-fashioned hot water and cold water taps because they actually know how to regulate those. Unlike our new fandangled bathrooms where, you know, we might have to wave our hand in front of something to flush the toilet or whatever. So basically trying to create an environment that is familiar and comprehensible for the person can make a big difference to their ability to keep functioning, you know, removing too many choices from the wardrobe, you know, organising and simplifying the tasks that they do. I think we often think about safety things, you know, handrails and ramps, physical access, but actually we can design the environment in a home with cognitive ramps that help us with our thinking and our planning. We know that the brain itself actually isn't ever fixed. It can reorganise. It's quite plastic. We talk about a term called neuroplasticity. Even people with dementia, their brains can learn. We really are beginning to imagine what life after a diagnosis with dementia means in a different way. So we're much more likely to be telling people, you've been diagnosed with dementia. It is a degenerative disease, it's a terminal condition, but actually if you keep your brain active, keep trying to learn, keep trying to stay socially engaged, eat well, keeping healthy in terms of diet, physical activity, mental stimulation, social connections, all of those things can really maintain the health of the brain, and for some people perhaps even improve their function if they improve those lifestyle factors. So we've got a long way to go in terms of improving those systems, but I think we've at least got that as a goal now, whereas previously I think we thought there was very little we could do to give people who had been diagnosed with dementia a good quality of life.
In our last episode of Parting, we began our journey with the Unteachables. Here's a little trailer to pick you up to speed.
Ty was always getting into trouble at school.
Getting into trouble.
It just felt like all the teachers were picking on him.
We're just picking on him.
Except for Miss Biddle.
But Miss Biddle wasn't at school today.
Or yesterday.
Or for the last month. The students were told that she had taken leave.
But what was that supposed to mean?
The substitute teacher for today was fresh meat.
Mrs. Crookshanks, who was as old as the dinosaurs, blind as a bat, and boring as batshit. Shame she didn't notice the flower on top of the fans in the room before she turned them on.
And then she was out.
What we're going to do now, if you don't mind. Sorry, what was your name?
Ben, Dover.
Said Ty.
And my name's Wayne.
Said Kate.
I bet you guys spent all recess thinking those up, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, hello. Yeah.
You spent all recess fixing your hair, but still doesn't look good.
Todd the Bod got a transfer out west. Bye, Todd. Miss Biddle returned from taking leave.
Okay, how's everyone going? Does anybody have any questions?
Everyone wanted to know.
But no one wanted to be the one to ask.
Miss,
Said Aisha.
how come you've been away for so long?
Miss Biddle looked hesitant.
Well, I needed to go and look after my dad, actually. He was really sick. He couldn't look after himself anymore. And then he died. Okay, so who wants to read their haiku?
3 lines, 5 syllables in the first and last lines, and 7 in the middle.
And none of it had to rhyme.
I can make noises with my hand and underarm. Fighty, fighty, fight.
Poor old Painbug vomited on himself.
I hate you, haiku. You are very hard to do. Go back to Japan.
Ty, come on. Let's see if you can beat these other jokers.
Ty stood up. He looked down at the words on the page.
When my father died, I held my breath.
When my
in for
father
days,
died,
scared to
I
let
held
it
my
go.
breath in for days, scared to let it go.
And just like that, it had started.
we are now going to visit the world of old K Duncan, or as we like to call him, the shit stirrer. Just a fair warning, there's a few swear words in here, so if you would like a bleep version, let us know through our contact info. So here we go, the Unteachables Part 2.
If you were to look at it on a map,
Kane's house would be the geographical centre
of the public housing estate by the lake.
He lived there since he was 6 years old.
He couldn't remember living in any other house but this one.
Only had 3 bedrooms and none of them could fit
And
there.
there was 5 of them living there.
Kane,
his mum,
his 2 dumb sisters,
and now his nan.
Nan had moved in with them after Kane's granddad had died.
She had been diagnosed with dementia a while ago. But after Granddad died,
it got really bad.
Really quick.
They didn't have any money.
It turned out Granddad had been getting paid the wrong amount on his pension and owed the government a whole bunch of it back.
Kane's mum ended up with the debt and couldn't afford to put Nan in a home. So Nan was given Kane's room.
And Kane was given the mattress in the lounge room.
oh, Nan.
Sometimes it was hard having her around.
Because, she's old.
Especially at first, and especially for Kane's mum. Nan wasn't dealing with the death of her husband in the same way as everyone else.
She'd forgot that he wasn't alive anymore, or who he even was. Sometimes she'd think Kane's next door neighbour Jack
was a husband and say some really inappropriate and embarrassing things to him.
words and embarrassing things to him.
Kane thought this was pretty funny.
But it made his mum cry. Kane would take Nan
on walks around the housing estate.
Mainly to give his mum a break from her.
Because she's annoying.
Nan pretty much needed 24-hour supervision.
Otherwise she'd
try and microwave the cat.
do some dumb shit.
That never actually happened.
But he wouldn't put it past her. Kane didn't mind hanging out with her. He found Nan's forgetfulness kind of cool.
So you get out of trouble all the time.
Sometimes she'll just repeat herself.
And that could be just annoying.
But sometimes she'd tell this amazing stories.
Kane wasn't really sure if they were bullshit or not.
But Nan seemed convinced that they were real.
They were very real.
And told him as if they would happened yesterday. And in her messed up kind of view of time, maybe they had.
That's a nice tree,
said Nan.
For the 3rd time since they began their walk.
True, Nan.
Kane agreed patiently.
What would the world be like without trees?
Nan would ask this a lot.
Look at that. That's a beautiful tree. What would the world be like without trees?
Kane didn't even respond this
that
time.
one?
It would make
That's
no
a gum
difference.
I used to shimmy up a tree like that to get away from my mum when she was after me with a strap.
You were never naughty, Nan.
Said Kane.
I got expelled from school once.
What for?
Can't remember.
Sure, Nan.
You probably beat up some other little girl for her lunch money. No, said Nan. None of us had lunch money. No shop. Mum used to make sandwiches.
Tomato sauce sandwiches sometimes. We'd eat them up real quick so that we could get out into this playground and climb trees.
Here we go, he thought. Back to the tree loop. But Nan stayed on story.
I didn't really like tomato sauce sandwiches. I used to try to swap mine with Margaret Thompson. She had lamb or beef in hers.
Where are we going?
Said Nan.
Around the twist, Nan.
Said Kane.
Where?
Said Nan.
Round
the block.
A beautiful day for a walk.
Here we go. Yeah, this time for sure.
For sure, he thought.
Smell that fresh air, she said.
The tension was killing him.
He decided to finish it himself.
Yeah, so fresh when the trees were around.
What would the world be like without trees, said Nan.
Hard to imagine, Nan, but it's a question that I seem to ask myself all the time.
That's a tree like I used to climb.
Yeah, this is our front yard.
Said Kane.
Do you want to climb it?
Do you think I could?
Yeah, we'll give it a go.
Nan was tiny, frail. Kane would worry that she'd break a hip
or something every time he boosted her into the low-hanging fork of the gum tree in their front yard, but he'd do it anyway.
Because Nan loved it.
They did it almost every day.
If Kane's mum wasn't around to skids out at him for doing it.
But for Nan,
Every time she was up there,
it was like it was the first time.
A brand new experience
that she had done 50 times before.
What would the world be like without trees? Nan says while we walk. Then, after a few more steps, she would say, "That's a nice tree. What would the world be like without trees?" "Oh, terrible, Nan," I'd usually say. But it doesn't really matter, because a few seconds later she would point out, "See that? It's a beautiful tree." Nan can't remember what she had for breakfast today.
But she can remember everything her family ate on Christmas Day when she was 8.
And she would tell you about it if you can get her on a roll. And there are no trees around. Because if there are, well, you know, what would the world be like without trees? No air, no oxygen, no more life, I guess. Everything forgotten.
My nan thinks my mum is her mum.
But sometimes my mum is her sister.
Or her best friend from school.
Her best friend from school.
My nan forgets what she said 2 minutes ago. She's forgotten that she has kids.
Except sometimes when she remembers their names in order. Helen, James, Ronald, Beth. She recites their names like they are characters from out of a book she once read and loved.
Some people think my nan is nuts.
Just plain annoying. But I think she's a time machine. You know, my nan has forgotten more than most people will ever know.
Kane closed his exercise book and looked up at the class, who were applauding his words.
A+.
To be continued. Shout out to Latoya, Tristan, Latrell, Shaniqua and Kane, who feature in that story. And a special shout out to Robina Beard, who played Kane's grandmother in that story. In other resilient communities, young people can experience dementia more often than other places. Lynn is back again, letting us know what it would look like.
So what we know about dementia in Aboriginal populations is that they get it younger because of the risk factors that are associated with dementia. So if you have more heart disease, more diabetes, the onset of dementia we're more likely to see maybe in people who are in their 40s and 50s. In other populations we might see it in the 70s and 80s. So unfortunately we do see it brought forward in the same way that we see some of the other ageing conditions brought forward. It's just also much more complicated then because people, if they're getting dementia younger, they might not necessarily recognise it. I think in Aboriginal communities there is also a spiritual belief that is attached to it in the same way that perhaps is attached to mental illness. It can be even more acceptable if they're talking about things that are out of context or out of time, because there might be all kinds of reasons why people do that if they're in contact with other spirits or people and places. And so we do see in different cultures dementia being less stigmatised actually. We know that people with dementia tend to have problems with their short-term memory, so it's quite difficult to lay down, new memories, but they spend a lot of time reminiscing and thinking about the past. So I think as family, sometimes we can spend a really long time trying to keep prompting people to be in a time and space that they're not in anymore, and correcting them when they get things wrong, and trying to say, no, that's not the way it is, and reorient them to the present rather than actually just being immersed more in their story and being more comfortable with actually just being in the headspace and the place of reminiscence that a person themselves want to be. Having meaningful things like storybooks, photo books, pictures of people that are familiar that prompt memories at a time where the person actually did feel more comfortable and oriented and understanding of what's going on. I think the physical environment, the way we organise that, but also the social environment and the way that we focus on being present to engage in some of those activities that support reminiscence, I think are really important.
What would the world be like without her? People try to put her in their pictures. A woman with no keys who walks down jagged coastlines. But that's not her. She is the sugar in tea. Her strength, character and wit. We listen in real time. Time travellers. She is all time she's kept for us. Now all the lessons she teaches us, including this last one, on our porch in a chestnut chair.
It is very much about how we can orient ourselves to their present. I mean, I don't like to make the parallel with children because I don't want to infantilise or turn adults into children again. But similarly, if children are immersed in an activity and they're in a particular headspace, if you actually just play with them and go there, you learn a lot about what's going on for them. And so I think more than the adults are like children, it is about our orientation towards being willing to be present with that person in what is going on for them. It is very much about how we can orient ourselves to their present.
So people that have dementia can't orient themselves to our present, but if we're willing to meet them where they are, with them in their present, we could learn a little bit more about each other. The people who have made today's podcast are Latoya, Tristan, Zane, Phil, Rowena, Daniel, Chris, Shanice, Latrell, Emma, Lynn, myself, Alice, Brianna, Gemma, Shaniqua, Naomi, Kane and Elias.
If you enjoyed listening to our podcast, you can support us to keep making stories by going to Beyond Empathy's website and donating. You can make a one-off donation or commit to supporting us regularly. Every little bit helps a lot. It's an easy site to find, www.be.org.au. That's B for Beyond and E for Empathy, so be.org.au. And even if you can't support us with money, you can really help us by spreading the word. Tell your friends, colleagues and families to listen. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, like our posts and share them. You know what to do. And if you want to have a conversation with the young people who created Parting, we're also telling a bunch of our stories in what we're calling podformances. Podformances can be live, virtual or both. You can even host one. You could ask us to come and present in your school or your team meeting, your conference, your event. Our young stars can appear live, virtually or both. Tell a few stories, have a yarn about grief, death and dying, and whatever else comes up. Just get in contact via our website. Beyond Empathy has also received funding for the podcast From the Edge from the Australia Council for the Arts, Create New South Wales, Zurich Australia and the Z Zurich Foundation, Co-Ordinaire, Southeastern New South Wales, PHN, through the Australian Government Public Health Network program, the Australian Government Department for Social Services under Families and Communities program through Bernardo's Australia, and the Tony Foundation. We'd love to hear from you. Send us a message about our podcast or make a comment. You can send us a message via our social media pages or via our website. Whatever's better for you. You have been listening to Parting, one of Beyond Empathy's podcasts from the Edge. Next time on Parting, Our story about the Unteachables continues as Sienna talks to her classmates about why her mother is always in bed. Catch you then.